Yes.
Right. Now I'm not planning to go through all the biology of ash dieback, because there's resources out there, and I assume that most people will have a basic idea of how it's spread and the history of the thing. And there's numerous resources that you can go and find to see symptoms in generally in smaller trees. What we've been looking at and what we're looking at as we go around doing the inspections is how it's affecting larger trees. So the symptoms that you'll see in those little videos that the Forestry Commission puts out, they're always, they're looking at the leaf, at the pattern of the infection on leaves. They're generally on smaller trees, and you don't always see those symptoms in larger trees. So this is the guide that we look at. Basically, this came from Norfolk and Suffolk. This is part of their guide, and it's really useful when you're going out. You can get a basic idea of the general level of decline. We use 100% live ground down to 25% live ground. Confusingly, that's the other way around from how Norfolk do it. So they go from 0% dieback down to 25% or 0% dieback. We did it like this because we've just had an eye tree survey done before we started our surveys, and one of the criteria in the eye tree survey is percentage of live crown. So we just carried on from that because we already had some trees assessed, some ash trees assessed under eye tree. So we wanted to go back and reassess them. That's why anyway. So you can all see the degradation over time there. Now that's useful if you're going around in summer. This is the basis for that. Oh damn! How do I go back? Hang on, I'll have to go back.
Is it just the up and down buttons on your keyboard? You should be able to.
I have no idea.
Usually you can
I don't
use
do this
left or
often
right.
enough. Is that right? I can. Oh yeah, you're right. Fantastic. Thanks. Yeah, these categories were drawn up by a Professor Roloff in Germany when it was spreading through that country. So you can see on the left there, these are the same categories, the same kind of dieback increasing in winter, and then on the right you can see the trees in leaf. And these are really useful for diagnosis in winter, because you can see on the top one, top left there, you get the normal structure of the ash with kind of candelabra shapes to the shoots. So they have vigorous side shoots coming out. The first stage in ash dieback is usually those side shoots die off. So you can see in the second picture down on the left, you lose that candelabra effect. So you tend to get what's called foxtailing. And that's a really obvious symptom that you can see in winter. So it's very useful. Now the trouble is with ash dieback, from what I've seen, you sometimes get to this stage and you can look at the tree and you can get binoculars on it and you think, well, it's got the foxtailing, so it's probably at 75% live crown. Often, even if it's got buds on and you can see those buds through the binoculars, a lot of those buds then don't burst in spring. And it's a very difficult sometimes to judge. Usually, if you can get, if the sun's on these shoots and you get your binoculars on them, then you can see that you know, they're slightly desiccated, maybe slightly discoloured in comparison to other ones. But if it's an overcast day and you're looking up into the sky, they're all silhouetted, it's very difficult. And then, you know, you've got to come back when the tree's in leaf. But from a diagnostic point of view, if you're, as tree wardens, go around looking at these trees, it's quite useful. Sometimes you can see the difference in the lower crown. You know, you might be able to reach some of these shoots, and some of them will be, they might all have buds on. Some of them will be slightly desiccated, and some of them will be nice and full and fat. And the desiccated ones you'll be able to snap. So you could tell the difference and extrapolate that into the crown. And it's not something that will be able to, you know, necessarily give you everything you need to decide to fell the tree, but you'll know which trees to come back to in the spring. And further on, obviously, we've got these late stage 50% dying live crown and 25% live crown remaining. These are just some examples from my my assessments. You can see here these two ash trees. A lot of the ash trees on this site they're all planted around about the same time, so they're all roughly the same age. But you can see on the right, that one is in serious decline. The one on the left looks absolutely fine. This was from 2019, I think. These two have declined a bit further since then. We did notice a significant decline between 2019 and 2020. It ramped up quite a lot. But this is another thing to look out for, because when you get two trees next to each other like this, you can say that one on the left, on the right, that's going to have to go at some point. But you want to be wary of thinking, well, if that one's going, I might as well take them all out. I might as well take them all out while I'm here, because the one on the left might be one of the few that's going to be resistant to the disease. So when it comes to felling, you need to be quite selective. You know, you not only do you not want to just indiscriminately fell, because it's a very bad look, and you don't want to lose all your trees at once. Even though it may be an upfront cost that you can, you think, if I've got the money now, I might as well do it. But you need to watch out for the trees that are going to be resistant in the future. So we've very much had a kind of piecemeal approach so far, which is kind of nibbling away at the problem. So we've decided, and I'll come on to it a bit later, but we've got a cut-off point for where we take action. I know it's slightly different for highways, but I'll come to that later. This is another one. This is probably the worst one we had. This again was 2019. As it turns out, this one was a highway tree, not ours at all. But this is a road. This is part of the public highway that goes up into part of the round walk, the Sheffield Round Walk, which is a very popular walk around the city, and it takes in most of our most prominent sites, and it takes you down a lot of the wooded river valleys. So it's a beautiful walk and extremely popular, and this takes you right up to the edge of the peak. So we've got different ownerships here, which is difficult. The trees on the right hand side of the road are parks. This tree in the middle is a high-rise tree, and then on the other side of the wall is private farmland. So we've got a lot of different, and the ash don't discriminate obviously between these. There are ash on each of those locations that do need to come down, and they're all threatening the highway. So there's an awful lot of coordination needed to organise this felling, and obviously this is extremely popular with the public. So these are photos that, to be honest, don't give you a very good impression, but point up some of the problems of trying to record the decline. These two ash trees in Crooks Cemetery, you see them there on the left in 2019. In 2020, the one on the right is declining a bit further, but it's quite difficult to tell because the conditions are slightly different. It's slightly brighter behind it. So ideally, we've been going back and recording the same trees from the same viewpoint to trace the decline, but you can never entirely perfectly replicate the conditions. So that's a bit frustrating. This is another one. Now this does illustrate the kind of decline that we saw typically across the city between 2019 and 2020. This is an ash in Hillsborough Park. The tent there was for the Tramlines Festival, but it looks okay there. I mean, you can tell that there's a little bit of dieback already. You can tell that that fox tailing that I talked about earlier, it gives you a bit of a jagged line around the edge of the crown in comparison to the full crown of a healthy ash. So that's another diagnostic point. But you can see the trees on the same tree on the right. Again, on the extreme right there, it's got the sun behind it, so it does look a bit worse. But the decline was quite significant. I'd say that there was probably a 20% decline in the crown, 2019 to 2020. And I know that when we had a talk from the Devonshire officer, he was saying typically they were seeing 10 to 15% decline year on year. So this was quite significant. Again, this is another one in Crooks Valley Park. This one I didn't even bother photographing the year before because it looked, to be honest, it looked all right. But now it's at about 25% or less its crown. So this one rapidly declined just in 1 year. And I've got some. These are other trees in Hillsborough Park. The tree that was in the previous photograph is just to the left of this photograph. But you can see this tree kind of centre left. I've put up the roll-off categories, so you can see that the fox tailing at the top of the crown, which is quite distinctive. So we know that this one is one that we may have to come back and fell next year, because this is, I'd say it's probably between 75 and 50% of its live canopy remaining. So we can anticipate that next year it might fall below half of its live crown remaining. And again, this is also an ash tree there, centre right, just in the background, which looks absolutely fine. So you've got very much a mixture in just in one little space. These are, I'm just going to put that down. I can't actually see my, oh, there we go. So it's 2020. Now the categories here are based on trunk diameter. So Cat A is trees up to 20 centimetres in diameter at 1.5 metres height. Cat B is 20 to 40, Cat C 40 to 60, and Cat D anything above 60 centi diameter. And as you can see from this, and we found this out last year as well. Disproportionately larger trees that have been affected. Now these stats are outside of woodlands. Within woodlands, we found the opposite is true. It's generally the younger trees that are getting infected first, and there's a couple of probable reasons for this. In woodlands, you've got the leaf litter remaining, and the leaf litter is what's generating the spore load. So the younger trees are getting hit first by the spore load that's being generated from the forest floor. Outside of woodlands, you generally tend to get more hygienic conditions. The leaves are cleared away. So the spore load that those trees are getting is largely coming on the wind. So it's the bigger trees that are getting affected. And again, it may be to do with vitality of the trees. If the older trees are getting towards the end of their life or into late maturity, they may not be able to defend themselves as well. This is a comparison between 2019 and 2020. Unfortunately, we used slightly different categories because we wanted to. At that point, we were thinking of getting volunteers in to assess the trees. So we did come up with a slightly different categorisation to what Norfolk were doing, and the methodology now is based on what Norfolk are doing, because Norfolk County Council, they were one of the first counties affected, and they've been working with FERA, which is the science arm of DEFRA, the Department for Environment. So they're not directly comparable, but the significant thing is that the dark green bars are significantly lower in 2020. So the light green bars are trees that are between 175% live crown. So you're just getting vastly more trees that are being affected. And those little black bars are creeping up as well, which are dead. So these are the same stats as the trunk diameter, and you can see again with the larger trees, the Cat D trees, there's a lot more decline in them, as indicated by the yellow and the orange segments. And again, this is 2020 and 2019 comparison, and vastly more trees have been affected. Again, I don't want to concentrate on this one because the methodology is slightly different. Hopefully, when we get our stats for 2021, we'll have a better comparator. These data are the stats from Norfolk, which they've been kindly sending up to me for a couple of years now. So you can see the progress that the disease has made in Norfolk. The yellow and the orange and the red, they're all going up year on year, and the green are coming down. I didn't get the 2020 stats off them as yet because everything was up in the air during the pandemic. But based on this, and these are our stats on the right for this year, I'd say we're probably now 2 years behind, 2 to 3 years behind where Norfolk are. So this is a really useful projection for us, because we can take this to our budget holders and say, this is where Norfolk were back then, and this is what it's like there now. So that you can give them a sense of the scale of the problem. And again, more stats. This is based on where the disease is coming from. So it's predominantly coming over to us from the west. and obviously the prevailing winds are coming over from the west, and the peak is to the west of us. It's pretty bad in the peak. So all of our worst sites were down here in the southwest. So the yellow and the orange are significantly higher down here. And also what we found this year, that it was spreading from the west. We did find out in 2019. What we found this year in 2020 was that it's absolutely shot down all of the river valleys, which are on the west of the city predominantly. So the Loxley, the Riverdale, the Porter, and the Sheaf. It's spread way into towards the heart of the city, down those river valleys. We suspect that's because the wind is just moves more slowly down those river valleys. So those wooded environments are slowing the speed of the wind, so it can drop its spore load more effectively. Because if you know anything about Sheffield, you know that it's built on 7 hills, just like Rome. So there are hills between each of these river valleys, and up on the top of the hills, there's relatively little ash dieback effect, and then you drop down into the valley, and it's quite devastating. This is something we did in 2019 that I was hoping to repeat in 2020, but due to coronavirus, we couldn't. We wanted to test how brittle these trees were. So we got one of those weight measures that you put on cranes and attached it to some rigging, and then pulled some branches out. It was very interesting. We got a variety of results, but this was really this is an interesting example of what we found. This branch, it says it snapped at 184 kilograms. For context, that's basically if an average climber up a tree just steps down onto a branch, he's basically putting about twice his own body weight onto that branch, which works out, so it's roughly 184 kilograms, which is really worrying, you know, just for a climber moving around in the tree. So if you don't have to come down onto that branch with any great force in order to snap it off. See, this wasn't true of all branches, but a significant proportion of them. The other worrying thing is that, you know, if you're a climber moving about in the tree, you know that you're probably not you wouldn't trust a dead branch to either anchor onto or step onto necessarily. But this has got live bits pretty much all the way to the end, and the trouble with the disease is, with the fungus, it's got multiple points of entry. So wherever you get a bit of a snap branch, the fungus can get in there, and you can start to get brittleness and decay way beyond where you've got live growth. And this is the fracture surface of that one. So you can see, if you don't know, this isn't a normal fracture surface. This is more like a brittle fracture. Like someone was talking about Kretschmaria earlier, you'd get that kind of brittle fracture with Kretschmaria as well. Although you get quite a smooth kind of ceramic surface with that fracture. So you can tell that this is quite embrittled at that point. And that is a branch that you wouldn't want to be stepping onto if you're a climber. So this experiment was largely so that we could assess at what point do we say this tree is no longer safe to climb, which then obviously gives us a clue as to where we should be drawing our line to say we need to take a tree down. Oh, hang on. I should have said that the next image isn't very nice. It's got a big wound on the man's face. So if you are squeamish, I'd look away a bit. This was caused by felling a tree. I'll move off it. So the difficulty is, as the trees decline, as you can see from the pool testing, they do become quite brittle and unsafe to climb. So therefore, you've got to decide how do we fell the tree. Now, in most cases, we can get a mute to the tree, so it isn't so much of a problem. But in a lot of cases, we're not going to be able. A MUP is a cherry picker, by the way, a mobile elevated work platform. So we can fell the tree from the cherry picker, and it isn't usually a problem. When you start to get into areas that you can't get a MUP into, then you've got to decide: do we fell before the tree becomes unsafe? This leads us into difficulties, obviously, with Stag in Sheffield. They are scrutinising everything that we do. We've always said we don't want to fell healthy trees, and we wouldn't. But we need to explain to people sometimes you have to go in before there's a problem. So we may have to go in and start felling trees that are at 75% of their crown remaining, because otherwise they're going to become either A, too dangerous to climb, or B, too dangerous to fell. If some of those trees, if we leave them till they're around 50% of their live crown remaining, then they have large bits of deadwood in them, and that's what happened with the chap who's got the wound to his face. He was felling a tree affected by ash dieback. The vibrations of the saw caused the branch to fall out and land on him. He was wearing a helmet, but it's quite unnerving. So our main concern, we obviously don't want trees to fall on the highways or on the public, but the main people that are in danger are contractors from these, because they're the ones that are going to have to get into close proximity to the trees and try and work out how to fell them safely. So in most circumstances, we've decided that when the tree is between 50 and 25% of its live crown remaining, then we will take it out. Obviously, prioritising those trees that are in the high target areas. So if it's in the middle of a woodland by a lesser used path, it's not going to be such a high priority. But in a lot of cases, we are going to have to go in and fell trees that are at around about 75%. If we know that we're not going to be able to get a MUP to them, or if we leave them, they're going to be unsafe to fell. For instance, in some of those river valleys, we've got trees that are on fairly steep riverbanks. They may not be at a point where they're necessarily going to fall on a path or a public right of way. But if we leave them as a consequence, and they get down to about 25%, and then they do become a hazard to something, we don't want to be sending someone in to fell them on a riverbank where they don't have an adequate escape route. They've got nowhere to go, basically. So, there's a lot of things to think about. this is just an example. This, you see the trunk laying on the ground there, just to the left of the chap, and the stump in the middle. Now, ordinarily, the way he's cut that shouldn't be falling there, but it has done because of what it says here. So the new tree rings being laid down in ash dieback affected trees. They basically, the tree has a biological imperative to lay down its vessels, its springwood vessels, in order to transport water. It lays them down, but then because of the effect of ash dieback, it doesn't have the strength, and doesn't have the energy stored to lay down later wood vessels, which are the things that give the tree its structural stability. So you tend to get weaker wood that is quite unpredictable, and once vessels and wood has been killed, you also get secondary pathogens coming in, particularly Innonotus hispidus, which can get in and further weaken the wood. So as it says here, felling hinges may be unreliable, which is another reason why we may need to act early. This is just an example of a MUP. This is from Devon, where they closed this whole road, a couple of miles of road, I think. And this is a program that's been ongoing with them. They're largely a highways authority because it's Devon County Council. So most of the trees that they're dealing with are by the side of the road, and most of them aren't in public ownership. I think it's a 90%, 10% split. So 90% of the trees are on private land. And a lot of the information and research so far on ash dieback has come from Devon County Council and from Norfolk County Council, both of which are predominantly highways authorities. So there hasn't been a lot, and it would be really useful on trees in urban situations, because there are different challenges. And obviously this would have, I would have thought that's mainly the situation that most of you are in, because we have all kinds of different problems, like ash trees, in large ash trees, maybe self-set, maybe planted in the backyards of back-to-backs, which are an absolute nightmare. They are one of the examples of trees that you really need to be going in and taking out sooner rather than later, because they're going to be an absolute nightmare to take out eventually. I don't know if you've come across any of those yet, but that's one thing that's beginning to worry me, because in a lot of those cases, the costs of removing them are going to be astronomical. Most of those people probably haven't got the money to pay for that, so maybe a case of the council stepping in. This is another approach that Devon have been taking. We haven't got to this stage yet. This is a pair of tree shears, so it just literally grabs the tree and shears it off at the base. Amazing, and probably quite useful. I think this would be the safest option, depending on where it is. I think I've run out. Come to the end of the line.
Okay, thank you, Nathan.